Hey, this is Nikki G and welcome to Better Commander, Corrupting Influence. That was my nickname back in college. Today we're doing a Precon breakdown. This deck is something else, but I'm a little low on this thing as a whole. As you'll see, this Precon is sort of all over the place and seems like a bit of a cynical attempt to cannibalize the mechanics of the main set without giving us enough value to really justify its own existence. Even viewed as an introductory product for new players, this deck doesn't deliver the cohesive gameplay we've been seeing lately from pre-constructed commander decks. Now listen, I'm going to go through all the new cards. I'm going to try to break down exactly what this deck wants to do, and y'all can make the call armed to the teeth with specialized knowledge. But first, get your fleshy tentacles over to the like and subscribe buttons, you silly geese. That's right, just punch them in and let's get on with the video. Alright, first things first, let's take a critical look at the face commander. We have Ixhel, Scion of Atraxo, 1 white, black, and a green for a legendary creature Phyrexian Angel. It's a 2/5 with Flying, Vigilance, and Toxic 2. Has Corrupted. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent who has 3 or more poison counters exiles the top card of their library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. So in classic Hunter Biden fashion, this little angel is trading on her dad's good name. Basically, this is a very good value engine that can play your opponent's decks, provided you can corrupt them. That's how I'm going to refer to opponents who have 3 poison counters from now on. They're corrupted. Alright, dudes. You got 4 mana for a Flying Vigilant Angel that can corrupt in 2 hits. Well, alright, well then what? That's the question this deck fails to answer. Alright, but let's not forget about Vishgraz, the Doom Hive. 2 white, black, and a green for a legendary creature, Phyrexian Insect. It's a 3/3 with Menace and Toxic 1. When this guy enters the battlefield, create 3 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. Vishgraz gets +1/+1 for each poison counter your opponents have. This thing can be a credible combat threat if you're proliferating poison counters. I like the art on this guy. It looks like a praying mantis. So this is 5 mana. This can generate 1 poison counter per attack, but also comes with 3 1/1 mites who can get poison counters going. But by the time you cast this, turns 4, 5, and 6, everyone will probably have some type of blocker out there. There is a token infect deck here, like a go wide deck with anthems if the goal is just to infect somebody out, and it isn't bad. So if I was building this deck, I'd probably use Ixhel, but honestly, if I was building Ixhel, I'd probably just buy singles and make it from the ground up. One of the themes in this deck is the corrupted mechanic, where your spells get powered up for each opponent who has 3 or more poison counters, so let's take a look at those. One of the best of these, in my not-so-humble opinion, is Glistening Sphere. 3 generic mana for an artifact. Glistening Sphere enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, proliferate. It has tap, add 1 mana of any color. Also has Corrupted, tap, add 3 mana of any 1 color. Activate only if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters. So kind of a low bar here. It doesn't matter how many of your opponents have 3 or more poison counters, as long as one has it, this thing's tapping. Very elegant design. I like the flavor. I like the art. Dude, I had a Glistening Sphere sucked in my Gnictigazoink for about 3 weeks. I had to go see a doctor. This is kind of emblematic of the good things in this deck. Alright, then we have Phyrexia Outbreak. Look at this poor guy in the art. He's like, oh, boo-hoo, now I have a carapace, or I'm a skeleton, or whatever. 2 and a black for a sorcery. Each opponent gets a poison counter. I like that. Then each creature your opponents control get -1/-1 for each poison counter its controller has. I like that too. Aside from the goofy art, this is a really good way to get poison counters on all your opponents. And late game, this can wipe their boards. Alright, then we have Norn's Decree, 2 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever 1 or more creatures an opponent controlled deal combat damage to you, that player gets a poison counter. I like that. Whenever a player attacks, if 1 or more players being attacked are poisoned, the attacking player draws a card. This is another interesting draw engine, but also rewards opponents for swinging at each other, assuming that you haven't been poisoned as well, which is always a possibility. Then you have Expand the Sphere. What do you do when you blow up a basketball, dude? You expand the sphere. 3 and a green for a sorcery. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. Put up to 2 lands from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If you put fewer than 2 lands onto the battlefield this way, proliferate a number of times equal to the difference. So this could basically say proliferate twice, or it could say go get 2 lands. It's kind of a weird exploding vegetables. This does give you the agency to pick, though. It says up to 2 lands. If you want to proliferate, just don't put any lands out. Early game, this is ramp, hopefully. I can see this being disappointed in practice, though. If you want the 2 lands and there's not 2 there, 6 cards is not very deep. Feed the Infection, 3 and a black for a sorcery. You draw 3 cards and lose 3 life, has Corrupted. Each opponent who has 3 or more poison counters loses 3 life. This is kind of weak sauce, and I'll tell you why. Say you got 3 poison counters on all your opponents. Great, that means you're going for an infect win, right? So then they lose 3 life. How the heck does that help with your infect win? I kind of get confused by the whole toxic mechanic. I know they're trying to water down infect, but infect wasn't that powerful to begin with. And these corrupted bonuses are great, but they all kind of lack a theme. How the heck are we winning with this deck? Geth's Summons, 2 black for a sorcery. Return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Also has Corrupted. For each opponent who has 3 or more poison counters, as you cast this spell, put up to 1 target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. This card's really cool and will be awesome in a deck that's putting things in the graveyard, big fat monsters. But aside from being generically cool with some sick art of a behemoth with a hole for a head, it synergizes with nothing in this deck. We also aren't putting our stuff in the graveyard, so we have to wait for an opportunity to use this, while a good deck makes its own opportunities. Then you got Contaminant Grafter, 4 and a green for a creature, Phyrexian Druid. It's a 5/5 with Trample and Toxic 1. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to 1 or more players, proliferate. Also has Corrupted. At the beginning of your end step, if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, draw a card. Then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. 16 arms, dude, that's a lot. Proliferating is something we want to do a lot of in this deck. The Corrupted text is very good as well. The wording of the Proliferate text really neuters this card though, and after trampling through and dealing damage, doing all this stuff, the opponent only gets 1 poison counter. Synergistic, but maybe a little weak. Alright, here we go. We got Non's Choir Master. 3 white for a creature, Phyrexian Angel. It's a 5/4 with flying and first strike. Whenever a commander you control enters the battlefield or attacks, proliferate. If you're using Ixhel, this is great. Get your poison counters out there and proliferate away. This has applications and counters decks that want their commanders attacking. Pretty sweet art as well. I like this card. Alright, then we have Glissa's Retriever, 5 and a green for a creature, Phyrexian Beast. It's a 6/6 with haste and toxic 3. Glissa's Retriever can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Has Corrupted. When it dies, exile it. When you do, return up to X target cards from your graveyard to your hand, where X is the number of opponents who have 3 or more poison counters. This guy's like a golden retriever, I guess, and it's got golden metal skin. Oh wow, pretty cool. This is a pretty cool card. I wish I had Trample though, it needs playtesting. Alright, and lastly, for new cards out of this Precon deck, we got Wormquake, 4 green for a sorcery, has Corrupted. Create an XX Phyrexian Worm creature token with Trample and Toxic 1, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast this spell. Then for each opponent with 3 or more poison counters, you create another one of those tokens. Oh wow, you can get 4, really great. That's cool. This is a really cool card for 6 mana. Even if you get 2, if one opponent is Corrupted, then you get 2 big worms, you can flash it back later. I got no problems with this card, dude. And we got a couple nice reprints in this deck. We got Grafted Exoskeleton, this is about $6, Calling Ritual a couple bucks. These are the 2 best reprints in the deck. They're both great cards. Grafted Exoskeleton is a haymaker if you can increase the power of your creature. However, there are a few ways to do that out of the box in this deck. Alright, so we're going to do some real talk about this deck. Everybody who doesn't want to hear some negative things, close your ears and go take a walk somewhere. So there's about 9 cards with Infect in this deck, or that grant Infect, but so many are inexplicably missing. We see the general shape of this deck, but how the heck does it win? That's the question, because you're spreading around poison counters to all your opponents and then doing nothing of value with them, let alone winning with 10 of them on each opponent. I mean, even with Ixhel, say you get the optimal strategy where you have 3 poison counters on each opponent, you're getting 4 extra cards you can cast from exile at the end of your turn. Alright, I mean, great, you still have to cast them. Infect was kind of a weak strategy before, didn't really have enough main deck support to be a win condition. I'm a little disappointed that so many of the cards you want in this deck are in the main set. It's not even fully spoiled yet. I can see if they left out, Chase Mythics or whatever, but there are other cards in the set like Venerated Rot Priest, Necrogen Rot Priest, and Tyrannax Rex. And then you want cards that proliferate. This deck has no way to win, no way to force through damage and a surprising lack of creatures. 20 creatures is not enough in a deck that ostensibly wants to win through infect damage. If you're winning with corrupted cards, well, there are only 7 or so in the deck to begin with, and they don't do anything to win. We also have some kind of confusing includes like Moldervine Reclamation. What the heck, dude? We aren't sacrificing creatures. I'm not sure why this is there. Alright, Trailblazer's Boots. This is a great card, but this is the only way we have to force through damage. Alright, and then we have 3 kind of pillow fort cards in this deck. You got Ghostly Prison, you got Windborn Muse. These cards don't advance our strategy at all. We got Norn's Annex. This is a similar effect, but it costs a little more or a little less depending on whether or not you're willing to pay 4 life. What the heck are these cards doing in the deck? Okay, you want to talk about upgrading this deck. You want to talk about forcing through damage, winning with Infect, and creating synergy with Proliferate effects. Now, the main set hasn't been fully spoiled yet, and I have no idea what these cards will settle out with price-wise. But keep in mind, this deck is designed to be parasitic with the main set. I'm a little cynical about that. There's going to be plenty of cards that belong in this deck from the main set. Honestly, upgrading this deck would require removing a really good percentage of the original cards. I'm not sure upgrading it is even worth it, but I can suggest some cards that will make the deck better. Now, why the heck are we not taking advantage of cards that can enter with counters so we can proliferate them, right? We got Astral Cornucopia. This can replace Commander Sphere really easily. Gyre Sage, this is a mana dork that can benefit from all our proliferate effects. You're putting counters on this thing. Then you got the Biophagus. This is a fantastic mana dork that can put extra counters on creatures, but this guy's gotten a little bit expensive at $7. Bloated Contaminator. This is what I feel like if I miss the gym for a week. 200 green for a creature Phyrexian Beast. It's a 4/4 with Trample and Toxic 1. Whenever Bloated Contaminator deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. From the new set, this guy would go great in this deck. It does everything we want to do. He's big for the mana value and has that sweet, sweet Trample. I have no idea how much this will be after it's all said and done. You know, if this is a $20 card, maybe don't buy it. Flesh Eater Imp. I'm a big fan of this card. 3 and a black for a creature. It's a Phyrexian Imp. It's a 2/2 with flying and infect. Sacrifice creature, Flesh Eater Imp gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So this is a great sacrifice outlet if you need one, and is an evasive infector. This can be a win condition if you have 10 tokens out there. Watch out, boy. He'll chew you up. He's a Spine Biter. 4 green for a creature Phyrexian Beast. It's a 3/4 with infect. You may have Spinebiter assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. So basically, if you're pumping this guy up, which you should be in an infect deck, this can be a one-hit kill, brother. And you want cards like Overwhelming Stampede. This is a great way to power through damage, and if you're running a bunch of infect creatures, this can be a fantastic win condition, along with cards like Triumph of the Hordes. Triumph of the Hordes like $12 right now. And there's a ton of tap lands in this deck. The mana base needs a ton of work, but thankfully all the pain lands are very cheap right now. Additionally, Dominaria Remastered has a nice suite of lands. I don't know what the heck you call them. They're check lands or whatever. But you have Woodland Cemetery, Isolated Chapel. They're very cheap right now as well. In conclusion, isn't that what you always were taught to put at the end of your essays in high school? In conclusion, I think this deck is a little bit parasitic, meaning it trades on mechanics exclusive to the associated set. You got your Toxic, Corrupted, they only have a handful of cards and no coherent theme among those cards. You really need a critical mass of Corrupted cards that work with a win condition. If you consider poison counters your win condition, you're far better off just building with infect creatures and pumping up their power. I think I'll do a budget deck doing just that with Ixal as the commander or Vishgraz. I'm also going to include a heavily modified Precon in the description. Alright, all that said, this deck and the new set brings some new toys to infect decks, but right now I would just pick up the good Corrupted cards and start building a Traxa, dude. Sneaky G from Better Commander, signing off.